Okay, so we are now live on our incidental episode of Talking Con, a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego. Usually we do this on a Sunday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT. But on occasion, we do have a guest which turns around and says, an interview on a weekend? That's sacred. Sod off. Go away. And that's the reason why Bill Sienkiewicz told me to go fuck myself at least 3 times on the trot until I managed to pin him down with some incriminating evidence. But yes, every once in a while we do these incidental episodes where we get the chance to talk to some really cool people. Hopefully, this will be enough time for you to launch into this. We are running a little bit late with the live aspect of this, but hopefully the notification's gone out to my followers and those people who are subscribed. Of course, do the whole subscribe thing, hit the notification bell, do all of that palaver down below in the YouTube if needs be. But the most important thing, of course, is we've got the comments up and running. If there's any questions that you have for my special guest today, which is Mr. Tom King, who I'm going to bring to the stage now. Hello there, sir. How the devil are you?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me on. We've been talking for years, and it's just wonderful to see a familiar face in these hard times.
Well, I mean, it's got to be said, I have a number of very key books in my collection. I mean, this bad boy can quite easily knock out an intruder if needs be.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, that's a personal favorite. There you go, the Vision and the... Yes, I'm not sure I've got both copies of that kicking around.
Look, that's what I did to that poor comic.
Tell me
I
about
apologize.
Oh no, that's a joy. That's a joy. What else have I got?
I always ask permission before I do that on the fuzz. I say I'm going to ruin this comic, and then I said, so
that's fine.
About one in 10 people say no, and I'm like, what an excellent choice you've just made.
I have no problem with that. I think it suits the book. With like full copy of Rorschach. I've got Strange Adventures.
Wonderful. I knew someone bought Rorschach. I knew it was. We had won that one sale in San Diego, so now I could track it down.
I've got more variant covers of this thing.
That's a big book.
Listen, I am a fan. I'm a huge, huge fan. So, I mean, I remember the.
Or if you're not, you just robbed someone who is a fan. So I feel bad for that.
Well, there's a very large collection of his shelf missing and bloody to the floor.
Yeah.
The first time our paths kind of crossed was at the Heroes in Crisis. Hang on, I might as well.
Oh God,
Heroes in Crisis.
There it is. You know, I'm on that cover. Yes, if in the upper left corner there is a little bald dude, and that's me. I'm very tiny, but I am officially owned by the DC Universe. They own my likeness.
Fair enough. I had not noticed. Did not know. That's an Easter egg I didn't know about. First time our paths crossed, I tackled you at the end of the Heroes in Crisis panel at San Diego Comic-Con. And I turned around and said, The Vision was my favorite comic for at least a decade, if not longer. And you turned around and said, yeah, I agree. Thank you. Good choice. Well done.
What an arrogant prick. Good. Good to see I haven't evolved. Good to see that I am exact. Because I was about to say the same thing again. I was like, fine, good, well done.
Well, my first question was going to ask.
Now like, is it still your favorite book in a decade? Because that means I've failed you like 50 times since then.
I was going to ask, do you still agree? Because do you agree that The Vision was the best book you've done? It must be up there, surely.
You know, it's funny. The Vision has become almost like an afterthought book. I don't know. I don't want to say it's an afterthought book. I'm incredibly proud of it, and I do think it's one of the best things I've ever done. But because it was a Marvel book, and I've been at DC for a decade now, and I know I'm incredibly proud of it. It would definitely be in my top 5 things I'm incredibly proud of. I reread it recently because I was on a panel where they were just like kind of doing a retrospective of it, and they're like telling me to come on and talk about it. And so I just reread it, and I was like, "Holy shit, this is depressing." When I got to the end, I had tears in my eyes, and I wrote this stupid thing, and I was like, "Who the fuck wrote this? Why does this person hate my emotions?" But I was happy to see that it at least to me stood the test of time, and all these years later, there's Michael Walsh killing it on that one issue.
Oh, dude!
Talk about coming in and making your mark.
I'm
I'm super. Sometimes I look back at my early writing, and there's some stuff that I'm like, oh, I was in this zone, or I was in that zone. But like Sheriff, Vision, I'm super proud of those two books. They're kind of written simultaneously. I love them both, and see stuff in them that almost like I was like, oh, I wish I still had the skill set to do that. I'm doing things there that I wish I still did. So yeah, I'm kind of jealous of some of that.
Because I mean, the next question then is, like I say, I said that to you at the Heroes in Crisis panel. What's your thoughts on Heroes in Crisis after this time now? Because I personally think it's grown, and it's a book that has stood more scrutiny as years go on, as storytelling efforts of yours come out. I mean, I know that there's a fair amount of critics of the whole 9-panel grid thing, which a lot of people kind of go off on. But I think it holds up really well, especially when you are deconstructing characters in a single panel, like you do throughout the course of that book. What's your thoughts on Heroes in Crisis after all this time?
I mean, I have such a complicated relationship to that book. I mean, I should start with the impact it still has, which still amazes me. I've written a lot of books. Heroes in Crisis, you know, I do signings, and inevitably at a signing, I get quite a few people who come up to me and are like, I was a cop, I was in the war, I went through stuff, and I was in a very bad place where I thought I might harm myself, and I read this book and it helped, and it dragged me back. And that's a unique thing when someone, and it's very, for lack of a better word, heavy. And Mr. Miracle also has that reaction among some people. But Heroes in Crisis even more than Mr. Miracle. And so I'm like, you can't be more proud of those moments. But on the other hand, there are hundreds of thousands of people around the world who, when they hear my name, they think he's the guy who made Wally a killer and doesn't understand comics. And that's, if you read the book, Wally's not a killer. I don't make him a killer. But that meme got stuck in their head. And because of that, they don't give a lot of other things I do a chance. And I regret that thought exists in the world. I wish it didn't exist. Because I think it's kind of like a little mind virus, and I wish I had the vaccine for it.
I mean, comics fans out there that seem to miss the plot and just instantly come to a knee-jerk reaction, say ain't so. I mean,
I know it's entirely unique to me, and Lord knows I have done it. It's like I have been guilty of such a thing where I read one panel online and I dismiss an entire work of art. I have done that in my life, or even worse, I read someone talking about a panel. I don't even see the panel, and I've dismissed it. So I have been guilty of the same thing. I've said this in other places. I think Wally is sort of miscast in that. I think it's true to that character, because if you woke up in a world and suddenly everyone was happy to see you, but you realized your children were gone and your wife was gone, I think that would have a huge impact on you and who you become. And again, Wally doesn't kill anyone in the book. He makes a mistake. He loses control of his powers for 1 second, and then he out of guilt, he tries to cover that up. So it's not a good moment, but that's one of the reactions I get from a lot of people. It's the difference between people who come to me with Mr. Miracle, people who come to me with Heroes in Crisis, is that people who suffer from trauma can do things they regret in those moments of trauma. And if you read the end of that, the end is about forgiveness, and it's about sort of, coming back from doing something bad. We don't just come back from pain. We come back from pain we caused others, or else there's no hope for us ever. So that's what that book is about. But Wally was in such a position. He had been in that very famous splash that I think Phil Jimenez drew for Jeff's, and people just was like, he represents us emerging from 15 years of DC sadness, and then I brought sadness to him, and people will sort of never forgive. And I regret that exists. So I regret that. I think the title Heroes in Crisis is a silly title. I wish it was called Sanctuary, but
was that the title you went in with? Is that what you took to DC, or
Heroes in Crisis was almost a joke title. I mean, look, this is just a good lesson for writers, or at least a good lesson for me in the future. Try to hang on to this. Is like, I came up with the title Heroes in Crisis as like a temporary thing. Mostly because I was like, if I put the word crisis in this, I fucking, I'm sorry to say this, and it hurts me to say it out loud. I was like, that people will think it's important and it will sell better and it will be the center of a big thing.
Yeah.
And I was a younger writer than I am now. And that was very sort of, I was like, I want to, because it was my first event, everyone had their turn on the event and they're like, Tom King, you've done this book, you're up to bat. And I was like, I want people to know that this is a capital E event. And I knew if I would put the word crisis in there, people would say it was just like shorthand for that.
I actually saw it as a type, it's, like you say, sticking crisis in there. When you have a crisis title and it is a big event and it is going to go in and it's going to really play with the status quo and it's going to go in, when you see or you think of a DC crisis event, it's on a universal scale. It's mammoth in its playground. Heroes in Crisis, it has the same emotional, so like swinging of the bat against the status quo, but it's emotional. It's smaller, it's more intimate, but it still works as a crisis event, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean that was always my intention. I felt the stakes we were dealing with were that big, and I mean, and it's a true, like, there are times you're a hero, and other times your heroism gets you into a point of crisis. But I just doesn't roll off my tongue as a good title, Heroes in Crisis. It just sounds a little melodramatic to my ears. It sounds a little soap opera-y. Sure. And the word sanctuary sounds a little bit more, I don't know, cool. Yeah. Just in terms of looking back on it, you know, it's like you wrote heroes. It sounds silly. It sounds just a little bit silly. But hey, so those two, miscasting Flash and the title being what it is, or that they're served by two kind of regrets about it. I don't know. But again, I love this fucking Clay Mann's art on that is so beautiful. And the fill-ins were Lee Week and Mitch Garrett's. You're not going to get better fill-in artists in the history of your life. And there are moments in it that I utterly adore. I mean, the stuff between, you know, Beetle and Booster, and the stuff between Ivy and Harley, and
well, I mean, that's the other thing as well. The fact that you teamed up Harley Quinn and Booster Gold. I mean, two characters I would have never have imagined. I mean, that's really picking up toys and smashing them together. That's just amazing stuff throughout the book.
Well, I mean, it was famously, and to this day, I still agree with myself. I never feel like it's about what characters, it's about the passion you put in those characters. Every character has wonder in them, maybe except for like Brother Power the Geek. But for that, I came up with the plot. I was like, there's this place, there's a murder there. There are two suspects. Neither of them did it. One of the people who died did it. And I sent that to Didio and I said, here's the plot. I need the characters. And he texted me like 5 minutes later. That's how much thought. He's like, okay, the two suspects are Harley Quinn and Booster Gold, and the murderer is Wally. And I was like, great, I can do this. And what I should have texted back was like, no, the murderer is Hawkman. Just like one step, so just like, you know, something just a little bit off. Or the murderer is Blue Devil, or I don't know, fucking somebody that wouldn't break everyone's heart. But I was like, no problem. Let's dig into all these characters and find what's wonderful about them. And one of the great discoveries was that Booster Gold is just the most fun character to write in comics, really? After Hal Jordan. But yeah, if someone would just let me write Booster Gold all day long, I would. I love him. When
I read that and I saw reading the dynamic between Booster and Blue Beetle, I just knew that you loved Justice League International as much as I did.
I do. Yeah. It's funny because when I read it as a kid, I'm of the age where, like, by the time I was reading comics, Justice League International was a little bit spinning out. Like, it had, you know, we were in probably like 50 issues had gone by or something, and they'd already spun out to Justice League Europe and all that stuff. So when it was like actually on the spinner rack, that's what I was picking up. And at that time, that was very confusing to me because, you know, I was looking for a Justice League that was classic Super Friends Justice League. And I got this weird Justice League where they're not quite good guys. And, you know, it was very, like, for a 7-year-old just looking for heroes, it did not appeal to me. But then I went back to it after I became obsessed with Legion of 5 years later and just realized what a genius Keith Giffen is, and was sort of reading all of his stuff. That's when I went back to it and was like, oh my God, it blew me away. I love I love the irreverence of it, but I also love that there's actual seriousness of it. You can just see three guys and bouncing off each other and bouncing just like the best ideas. I love that run, obviously. I mean, Human Target's like a love letter to that run.
Well, I mean, Justice League International was the first kind of DC book that I got into when I was a kid and I was getting into American comics. So that was my jumping in point.
Wow.
That was my jumping in point, and my first DC event was Millennium. I'm stunned I'm still reading comics right now, frankly.
I read Millennium as a child too, because I at one point, right, like 11 or 12, I was like, I'm gonna read all the events, because back then you could dive in, they'd be like $2 a pop. And I remember I was like, Millennium, I was like, what? That is the most bizarre of all events. That is just
it's the only event where the tie-ins are a damn sight more entertaining than the actual.
That is true. That is very true.
The thing about Millennium is it really is absolutely status quo stuff. It's, you get to the end of it, it's Control or Delete. Let's crack on and forget that almost happened.
Yeah.
That absolutely does not happen in your books. Yours has long-lasting ramifications, which is just, you absolutely swing for the fences on the books that you've done for DC and for Marvel, and which kind of begs the question: how have you gotten away with this? How have you been given the license to just go, right, here we go? You want a story, you want something that's just going to leave the landscape slightly transformed. Here we go. How do you go in with a brief and just say, no, this is how I'm going to really play with the sandbox, or do they just let you run free?
It's a fantastic, probably because of Vision, probably because I just started that way. Like, Vision made my career, sort of set the template of what I was, not in terms of the audience, but in terms of editors, like what they're looking for when they want me to be on a book. Ever since Vision, it was like, oh, Tom's going to give us the vision of this or the vision of that. And so it really was the success of that book. And that book was, came out of just Omega Men had been canceled. Nobody was buying Sheriff. And I wrote, it was just like a fuck it, I'll write what I want kind of thing. So yeah, I think I really do think it's just because of the success of Vision and what that did. And then Vision had even more success, obviously, because it was, the inspiration for the sort of the WandaVision. I don't know, what you call it, a jumping off. That's an arrogant ass thing to say, but the director called me and told me that, so it's true. So I apologize for the arrogance of it, but because of that means that people are willing to take risks. They've seen that when I can do this, it leads to success, not only in publishing, but outside of publishing. It gives editors more leeway to spend money to do it, basically.
I mean, it also introduced a lot of mainstream comics readers to a new style of writing, in that you really, for me, the flourish of what you do. And okay, this is where I'm just going to blow smoke up your ass. You just have to sit there for a couple of minutes and take this.
I'm ready. Let's do it. Okay, oh my goodness. I've been waiting all day for this.
I think the genius of your writing, okay, I'd use the word genius there. So it gets, okay. It's the small moments. It's the delicate moments in between the big bombast, of which is in there. But it's the interaction, the two people sat at a desk, almost the fireworks between the dialogue between the dynamic of two characters in a room. I mean, Rorschach is a book which I was utterly blown away by that book. And a number of my friends were, in that it was something that we read the issue and then we had to go back and reread it again to sort of like swim in the dialogue of it and just kind of really embrace that. It's the delicate moments that you really kind of allow a book to breathe. But that is different to most mainstream comics, and it's get it crammed in there. Let's get as much as we can in, and not allowing stuff to breathe. Vision was kind of like that book, which allowed people to see where that was going and where that was something that they could enjoy. Do you feel, or when you have people talk to you at conventions, or when you have, say, maybe old school readers that are used to a little bit more of a compact storytelling, do you find that they fight against it, or it's something that they've just kind of grown to love? Or what's been the reaction when you speak to readers like that?
I mean, I think that's kind of I don't know, I hate to reduce my industry, but it's funny you talk about like the bombast, and I grew up on comics. They were just my true love, and they are to this day. I've been reading for 40 years now. But I think when people look back, especially on superhero comics, our favorite moments or our closer eyes moments, mine, not just mine, but the things I see over and over and over again, are like, the opening to Killing Joke when Batman and Joker have a quiet conversation. No, but nobody talks about the action scene at the end. It's all about that the those 3 pages where he's like, why do we do this? Or in Kingdom Come is big action, blah 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 blah. You talk about that book with any comic fan, you're going to talk about that last scene where they're just the 3 of them are sitting in a restaurant having a moment. Neil Gaiman's Sandman is full of high mystery and majesty and everything. My God.
Yeah.
But the moments I remember are just like these, dream and death, sitting down in a concrete skateboard, just sharing them. Like the moments we take, even Frank Miller. I love Frank Miller. He's a friend of mine. Like he's the most bombastic writer. Just, read any of Sin City. It's all it is bombast, right? But when I think back, on Dark Knight Returns, people think sort of those little moments of him and Carrie hugging for the first time, "You're my Robin," and all that, and him and Jim talking on the roof about how they used to drink ginger ale in their cups. Like I don't know. I think and people. Grant Morrison is the biggest, craziest idea man in the history of everything else. When he dies, God forbid, in 50 years. When they die, I know he goes both ways as pronouns. The first thing that'll be on their obituary is that page from Superman All-Star where Superman is talking about suicide. So, our medium is full of bombast, but the greatest moments are our medium are the small personal moments, and so I'm always sort of reaching for that. So it doesn't seem out of the mainstream at all to me. It seems almost exactly in the mainstream.
Cool. I mean, the book for me that defines that is Human Target, which is just almost nothing but, really. It's really, if you want to talk the bombastic moment, it's really the Guy Gardner fight. But the rest of it really is a man kind of coming to terms with his life, the meaning of his life, the meaning of what he's done, the meaning with the relationships with the people he's met over his life. Even developing a new relationship at the tail end of it, and it is nothing but introspection, and I think that's what makes Human Target such a beautiful book. Were you surprised by how? I mean, you really did kind of stretch that book out and really make it about those beautiful moments of a person, sort of like looking over his life, doing a little bit of a whodunit, but but that was almost kind of, I'm not going to say in the background, but it was more about the journey rather than the destination. Human Target. What was your reaction to that, and how people responded to that book?
I mean, that was the first book, and I work with the best artists in comics over and over again. From Bilquis to Elsa.
I'm going to be talking about one of my favorites after this.
Yeah,
after this bit, I'm going to talk about my favorites. But go on.
But that book was very much, and it was the first time where I was like, I sold it by the art. Like there was revolutionary art in Human Target, what Greg was bringing to it, that was my main reaction to that book. Was like, I cannot believe how beautiful this book is. He was speaking to my soul. He was sort of conjuring this illustration stuff, from old like Georgie and Kobe Whitmore, like these illustration artists from the 50s, and bringing them into a comic book medium. And when I think of Human Target, the first thing I think, or the second thing I think of is when I finished that book and read it. When I got the second trade, 6 months ago, I read it through. God, you should never read your own work, but what the fuck? I was like, this is everything I ever wanted to do in a comic. I felt it was a crisis moment. It was a me, and it was a writer in crisis. because I was like, this is everything I love about comics. It's beautiful and personal, but it's funny, but it references old comics and it relates to my childhood. And it's also like, I love, noir fiction, and I love this sort of 50s illustration style. And it's also very romantic, and it's also very tragic. And at its heart, it's about death and suicide, which are themes I enjoy. I was like, this is the book. When I was 12 years old and I read Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns and Mouse, kind of like the 1986 trilogy, this was the book I wanted to make, and I fucking made it. And now I have no idea what to do with the rest of my life. So yeah, that's Human Target to me. It's kind of on some level my platonic ideal of a book. And
you've been, like you say, staggeringly lucky with the artists you've had the joy to work with. I mean, I'm not going to ask if there's a personal favorite. Not a chance.
Oh no, I'll tell you, Mitch Gerrans is one of my best friends.
He's your boy.
I'm the godfather of his child. We talk to each other every single day, and so he'll always be number one in my heart. And people, that's not a shocker. Yeah, we're close. So we've got it. We've been through this from the beginning. He was on Sheriff with me when that was the first comic I ever wrote, was Sheriff #1, and it was drawn by Mitch. It wasn't published first. Obviously, Grayson came first, but that was the first literal comic I wrote that Mitch drew. And so we've been together for 10 years through a crazy journey that involved, us having children, us going through COVID, us going through all the weird politics of the thing. And so when you go through all that stuff together, we're buds, we're pals.
Excellent. Which begs the question, certainly with, like, for example, with Greg Smallwood on Human Target, with, the two that I want to point out in particular.
Although Mitch is now
Bilquis Everly.
Oh my God, yeah, insane, right?
Holy crap! And Elsa Charretier, who you how do you just kind of like fall on your feet in a lucky pile of shit somewhere and just manage to get your hands on these amazing artists, or do they come to you, or is there a matchmaker out there who we really need to send a big bottle of something very nice to?
I think the only artist I can kind of take credit for is Jorge Fornes, who I did Rorschach with. And we did Danger.
I'm loving this. I'm just picking up books and going, yeah, got that.
I love. Jorge just sent me. Oh, here, I'll have it. Jorge just sent me original art from Rorschach. It's so wonderful, isn't it? Gorgeous.
Hang on a sweet second. Let's just get that full screen. Thank you. Oh, wrong one. Hang on. That one. That one.
There, yeah. Isn't that beautiful? It hasn't even framed yet. Just sitting in my office. I haven't figured out where to frame it. Put it right there. Yeah. Isn't he the nicest guy?
You do have a hell of a collection behind you. It's got to be said. I mean, how often does your art rotate? How often do you kind of get things moved around?
Not that often. I think the pieces on the wall have been there for quite some time. It's always a heartbreaker if I buy a really nice piece and I got to take something down to put it up. I have now filled up every wall in my office. It's leaked. And so my wife is like, how far is it going to leak? But it just leaked. It's leaking into the hallway outside my office now. I filled up. My kids are really into Archie, and I bought so much Archie art from the 50s and 60s. And I put it up on now there's a wall in my house that has 51 pieces of Archie art. It's like I don't know how to describe it, but it's a thing in my house. If you walk through, you're like, oh my God. When I, there's a lot of stresses in life, and a way I relieve stress is by collecting and framing and putting art on the wall.
It's just
yes. But your question of the artist, it's typically yes, except for Jorge. Jorge, he was on Twitter. He would tweet at me, "Hey man, I draw a good Batman," basically, and he was like working as a car repairman at that time, and so I was the one who sort of found him. He had found some minor work over, I think, not minor work. I'm sure it was fantastic, but he had found some other work at Aftershock. But I was the one who sort of brought him to DC's attention and got him on Batman, and we worked. But besides Jorge, everyone else is just been wonderful, fortunate. I mean, Elsa approached me. She had read something and was like, "Do you want to?" You know, Elsa always takes. She's wonderful in that way. She takes her shot. You know, she doesn't let life come to her. She takes life by the horns. And she came to me and said, "Do you want to do your first create our own?" And I just said yes. And then we came up with Love Everlasting. And Bilquis was found by my editors, by Brittany Holzer and Jamie Rich. They're like, "You want to do Supergirl? How about with Bilquis?" And I was like, the easiest thing in the world to say yes to. And now I did follow up with her afterwards and said, "Would you please do a creator owned with me?" Or actually, I think my actual email was, "Whatever you want to do next. If you want to do Super Apes, or if you want to do Marvel, or if you want to do Archie, whatever it is, I will write for you." And she said, "Let's do creator owned."
Well, I want to talk to you about that at the back end, because I think I want to wrap up on that, because I definitely want to find out about this book that you're coming up with. We've got Gary Maloney who's joined in. Tom, the Art Whisperer. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, you managed to you do find them. You do find them. With Love Everlasting, which is just one of my favorite books. I mean, I could say this about most of the titles, but one of my favorite books of the last decade easily, because I mean, I've been a massive Elsa fan for so long. I mean, what she does and what she brings to the page and how she uses shadow and contrast, it's just astonishing to read.
I think what you're showing now, which is the second volume of Love Everlasting, Too Hip for Love, I think that's the best, maybe not my favorite, but I think it's my personal best writing I've ever done. I think that would be when I was just, in terms of execution and throwing away a lot of my little ticks and doing something, you know, new and meaningful. Yeah, it's a bizarre, because it's volume 2 of a creator owned that not a lot of people read. But yeah, I think that's my personal best I ever did.
Wow. I mean, it's such a unique story and an approach to love comics and romance comics. Yeah. Of a slightly more bygone time. Just you clearly have an encyclopedic knowledge of history of comics, but why was romance comics something that you wanted to kind of deconstruct with Love Everlasting? Why that particular genre?
Well, I mean, I got into romance comics through art. I was collecting art, and if you want to buy an Alex Toth hero page, you're paying $10,000. If you want to buy an Alex Toth romance page, you're paying $2,000. So I was like, I'll get a Toth romance page. And then because of that, I started sort of reading the comic site just to see what I was buying. And then I started reading romance comics. And I had, you know, again, like you said, I know a lot about comic book history. I've read a ton of books about it. It's something I love to read about. And I had never sort of delved into and realized what romance comics were, and the fact that they used to be somewhere between a quarter and a third of the comic market for something like 40 years.
Yep.
And that there are literally, you know, hundreds of thousands of pages of this now forgotten art form, and what they said about the culture at the time. And just as much as all of us have struggled with, you know, what superhero comics said about the culture of, you know, what Marvel was saying about the Cold War, you know, what Timely was saying about World War II, like, because they were just trying to appeal to the broadest audience possible. What were these comics that were trying to appeal to this broad female audience say about those times? I thought that was an utterly fascinating question. And then in reading them all, I mean, it was the easiest idea I ever came up with, because it's basically the same story over and over, but there's hundreds of thousands of the same story. And to me, and it's obviously a different woman with a different name, but it all seemed like the same woman. It's always this kind of 21-year-old, you know, white Christian woman who has some problem, overcomes it, and marries a boy. And I was like, it seems like it's the same woman. And I was like, what a bizarre life she's leading. This woman who has been over and over, and she's sort of subjected to this, like, this need for us to be happy. Like, I started feeling sorry for this woman. This sort of need for us to have this. And these are comics written both, you know, from you know, romance comics started in the late 40s and lasted to the mid 70s. Written for, you know, in that time when America was trying to force an image of perfection upon itself, a very beautiful image of perfection, but it was very much a white suburban image of perfection. That, and it's kind of, it's, you know, talking about mind right, it's still with us today. This idea that, you know, and I'm obsessed with this idea that like there was a time and place in the 50s, this sort of Leave It to Beaver, Donna Reed time, that we somehow was our, in America, that was our Eden, and we lost it. And there are people in this country who are still like, we lost it for this reason and this reason and this reason. And that's why I'm so angry all the time. And there are people who are like, no, that was a hellscape, and thank God we lost it because it was awful. And that's still one of the main conflicts in America, is sort of our arguing over this garden which never existed. It was nothing. It was not, you know, read a John Cheever novel. There was no idealism there. There was, they knew it was an illusion while it was illusioning. And so I very much wanted to, that's been a theme. I mean, you can go back to Vision. It's a theme in my work, the idea of, you know, the idyllic nature of things, and how there are no, and how, and it just doesn't work, and how that ideal haunts us. I mean, it comes from when I was a kid. I mean, it's not fucking subtle psychologically. When I was a kid, my parents were divorced, like viciously divorced. They fucking hate each other. And I would go to my father's once every 2 weeks, and my father would just plop me down in front of a TV, and I watched TV, and I watched Nick at Night, and I'd watch these ideal, you know, My Three Sons, Donna Reed, whatever. And I'd be like, look at this, look how happy and wonderful everything used to be. And now I'm living this life in the 80s and 90s where there's just, families don't exist, and there's hatred, and there's war, and there's like, how, and that coded upon me this the distance between the ideal and the real. And that's been a sort of a theme in all my books ever since.
Do you think that's where the connection with the Vision and WandaVision, maybe that's what he took from the Vision, and that kind of attempt to create an ideal world, and doing it through television, and doing it through a medium?
Yeah, no, the first few episodes of Vision, I was like, oh my God, did they take this out of my subconscious? How did they do that? Yeah, that was a very like, am I in the Matrix kind of moment for me.
I don't doubt it. I mean, certainly Elsa, and what I've read about Bilquis as well, I mean, these are not passive artists. These are not creators that will read a script and just go, okay, I'll just bang on with that. They are very much about the to and fro. They are very much about having a dialogue with their writers and seeing where the story can develop and grow. And I know that certainly with Love Everlasting, it is very much a two-hander when it comes to the creation of that. What's been the biggest surprise an artist has ever given you in terms of the idea that you originally came to them with, and how the book finally ended up? What's the one where you just gone, wow, where did that actually come from? Who actually came up with that? Was it you? Was it me?
Oh, well, that's a fantastic. I mean, the easy answer is something I already talked about, Human Target, where I've told this story before, but I did not take that book seriously. It was a Twitter joke that my editor.
Really?
Yeah, I made a joke on Twitter. My editor's like, do you want to take? I made a joke about Human Target being silly if I ever wrote it. And he's like, do you want to write it? And then he got Greg on there, and I knew Greg. You know, I'd read the Moon Knight thing, and I knew he was good. And but when he turned in his first cover, which is cover 1, I was like, oh, that's what this book is. And literally I wrote. He turned in that and probably a little bit of issue 1, and then I wrote all 12 issues in a row before he turned in the rest. So I was done with issue 12 before. But yeah, him turning that in and being like, this book is like this retro modern, you know, what if George Clooney was in Human Target and it had that awesome soundtrack and it was like, you know, Ocean's 11 kind of vibe. The whole vibe of that book came right from Greg. That was not in the pitch. He got that. The idea. It seems like a silly idea, but I don't write cool characters. I'm not very cool myself. I'm a comic book nerd. I was the guy on the bench when everyone else was playing the sport when I was a kid. When I played baseball, I was in deep fucking right field, pretending I was Wolverine, with the ball flying over me. But Chance, him being cool, which is the heart of that book, that Chance is actually cool, comes right from Greg. He wrote Chance he drew Chance as cool, and so I had to write him as cool. As far as like other, you know, big things, Yeah, that's.
I mean, the best example I think I can come up with is I'm going to bring it up on screen is Strange Adventures, and certainly when man, I mean, when Mitch came, whose idea was it to have the multiple art styles for the various elements of the story?
That was my idea. I came up with that.
Yeah.
This is an excellent example. The page you put up is almost perfect. Doc Shaner. So in the original pitch that I pitched to, basically I went to Mitch's house, and we were thinking about our next book after Mr. Miracle. And we just went through his shelves. He's like, "How about Adam Strange?" And I went home that night and sort of delivered him the pitch the next day of sort of what it would be. This idea of Mr. Miracle investigating Adam Strange for war crimes, and then I pitched to him. I was like, "And we'll," because him and Doc are best friends. They've been together since the beginning. And I wanted, and Mitch had just had a kid, and I was like, I can't put you on a 20. I'm like, I can't put you, but I don't want you drawing a 28-page book when you have a 3-month-old at home. So just out of the necessity of that, I was like, you and Doc could divide it. I'd work with Doc briefly on a Green Lantern special where he killed it. And we could even divide it like within the page, and Doc would show sort of like the cartoony, like nice.
I was going to say who decided, who flipped the coin on what style was going to be which.
So I was like, he'll draw the ideal world, and you'll draw the real world, because Doc is very much the ideal superhero artist. I mean, he literally draws, like, if you're doing, we're doing a re-release of Silver Age Legion of Superheroes, who do we get to draw the cover? Get Doc Shaner. Like, that's like one of his things. He's kind of took Darwin Cook's place doing that for DC Comics. And so that was the original plan, and then we put it all together and made it logistically work, and it's amazing that it works. But what Doc did was, he's like, you have pigeonholed me. I had mistaken. He's like, I am not the guy who just does the nice stuff. And so he started designing these worlds, and he's like, here's like 7 bizarre alien creatures I've designed, and here's like some very nasty stuff I have designed. And so his half of it changed from what it was supposed to be, which is kind of, I was going to do the ideal and the real, to more of a flashback sequence where I could show Adam slowly going crazy and getting to where he needed to be. And so it became just the real and the real, but different versions of that. It was still the lies and the truth, but you were seeing the lies as Adam was, you were seeing the truth in the past as Adam was telling the lies in the present. So Doc and how he reacted changed everything. And you're showing me this thing. So like, Doc drew a cover before I wrote this issue, and it had her in this outfit made of skins with this paint on her. And I was like, what is this? And it's like, I don't know. I just came up with it. And he had drawn these. So I wrote this whole issue to justify the cover of what Doc did. And all of the creatures in it, he created just out of boredom. He's like, here, he built all of Ran. He built sort of this Game of Thrones Ran world. It was all Doc Shaner. And I had to write to it.
This is a guy who had a new kid to look after.
Yeah, well, that's yeah. So
and he put more work on his plate.
Yeah, it's put more, exactly. So now, that's a fantastic example of an artist sort of being like, this is the way to tell the story, and him being absolutely right.
I mean, there's also the aspect that is a story within stories. It's tales within tales, and which is why I really loved the idea of putting quotes from comic creators at the end of the books, because it really was about the creation of a mythology, and that's what Adam was doing. He was creating a mythology for himself. But then you also had these quotes, and I've been rereading Strange Adventures, and then to come across a quote from Ramona Fradon at the end of an issue, and to have her pass so recently. I mean, the quote is there, and it adds a lot of resonance in her passing. What was the decision to put those quotes at the end of the books? What was the reasoning for yourself to add those?
I mean, it was first of all, I should say, yeah, Ramona was, I wouldn't call her a friend. Everyone knows she famously set up at Baltimore every year, and Baltimore is my local con. So for years and years and years, once a year I would sit down, buy a sketch from her, and talk to her a little bit about comics, and she was just the best. She just did a cover for Danger Street for us, so just a legend. Lived 97 great years and left a legacy. May we all achieve what she achieved. But yeah, the quotes. I mean, it started off. I'd used quotes before in Omega Men, which was ripping off of Watchmen. So I wanted to use these quotes again. But those were always taken like from Watchmen quotes like Bob Dylan and Nietzsche and these big things. And I had used William James, one of my favorite philosophers, for Omega Men. And for this one, I was very much writing about people who construct fantasy worlds and sort of the reality behind them. There was the original. It's funny we're talking about this now with Dune 2 being the biggest movie in the world. I mean, it was Dune is one of the examples of the things that Strange Adventures was trying to comment on or was built upon. The narrative of Dune is like this classic narrative that was used over and over and over again, which is a ripoff. It's all a ripoff of Lawrence of Arabia. It's sort of started with that, where it's what Dune is a direct ripoff of Lawrence of Arabia, where the Harkonnens are the Turkish and the other are the British. But the idea of a white guy goes into a brown land, helps them overthrow an evil empire, marries the princess of that land, and becomes the hero is it's one of the oldest comic book tropes. Alex Raymond made a whole career out of it, and it's used over and over again. And it still has a lot of resonance power because it's just made $83 million last year, or last week. So I was writing about that sort of, but if you actually read Lawrence of Arabia and you actually understand what was going on there, it's so much more complicated than that. And the movie Lawrence of Arabia actually gets into some of those complications, but even that misses a lot of the sort of how bizarre and sort of what it means for one empire to come in when another empire is left, and the legacy of colonialism, and how what is set up by colonialism eventually burns, and the lies it takes to make all of that work. That's what Strange Adventures was about. And so
trust me, as a Brit, I got that.
Yeah, yes. But so to go to the quotes, I was going for like the idea that these people who create these worlds, which I'm always fascinated by, these people who created the ideal worlds of the Silver Age, because everyone quoted as a Silver Age artist, they're not writers.
Yeah.
So the people who were making that art were living very complicated lives, and they were just trying to get by, and they were very human. Underneath the ideals they made, they were very human. And so that's what the book is about, and so that's what the quotes are all about. And I made them all artists because I knew it was a very art forward book, and the fact that I had the two of the best artists in comics doing their best work in a way that's sort of never been done before, and merging it. So I decided sort of the art thing was sort of to shout out Mitch and Doc and what they were doing.
And I think the other book we'll talk about before we kind of move on to I'm certain a bunch of people are going to be waiting.
My whole life. We're going through the whole thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, the other one is Mr. Miracle, which again, it's about. Christ, okay, what is it about? It's well, for me, it's about trying to create your own mythology when someone else's mind is fracturing, and it's almost fracturing under the weight of creating his own mythology. And it's especially when he's also got all this pressures from family and on all sides. But he's trying to keep the jigsaw pieces on the page, on the tray, when the tray is constantly being kicked from underneath. And he's trying to keep it all together, but the only way he can kind of do that is flipping the table over himself. And I don't know if I'm misreading.
No, you asked me a question. I was thinking, well, what is Mr. Miracle about? If I had to define it in one sentence, it's about a man who killed. It's about a man who tries to kill himself and recovers from that. I mean, it's just. I feel like it's in that way. It's almost very simple, but it's about what does the mystery of the thing is why did I try to kill myself and how can I stop myself from doing it in the future? That's what it is.
Yeah.
And he never finds, the answer. So that's why the last issue is ambiguous, but he does manage to live on. He does manage to keep going. So yeah, that I guess that's what I would say Mr. Miracle is about. It's about recovery.
It's such a it's not an easy read.
No.
Let me rephrase that.
It's got some funny in it. It's got some
funny in there. Yes. it's when I say it's not an easy read, it flows well and it reads off the page, and it reads well. But it's something that you then have to sit down and kind of ask some big questions because I'm a floppies reader. I always have been. I mean, the piles of books tells you. So to then get to an issue and then have to stop and think about what that issue had told you before you move on to the next chapter, instead of just blitzing through the whole story, which is the reason why I've always been an episodic fan. I always buy single issues rather than trades. I'm a big episodic reader.
Love it.
Mr. Miracle was a book which benefited so much from being a floppy read for me, because you stopped and reflected and kind of saw what this guy was going through and the questions he was asking himself. Which way do you prefer to read a story? Because like you said about coming up with Strange Adventures, that you kind of came up with a story and kind of wrote it all in one go. Are you somebody that likes that kind of overarch, getting it all nailed down, or do you like piecing it chapter by chapter? Which is your approach to it?
I switched to trades 2004, mid 2000s. God, it's 20 years ago. We're getting so old. How did this happen? For money purposes, because back then you could get on Amazon. You could easily, and also, I'm a classic a comic fan of my generation, where I think I had 18 long boxes and they died in my mother's basement of mold. And once I sort of had my own house, I don't think my wife was ready for me to rebuild that in any room. So at least the trades I could put on bookshelves, and you can see like direction or which direction. Oh, there's like I have bookshelves and bookshelves of trades back there. So yeah, I'm a heavy trade reader. I usually read because I get digital comps for free. I read them digitally if I just want to dive in and out. But if I want to like sit down on a couch, I'm reading a trade. I don't, it's funny. Like Mr. Miracle was written much more serially than Strange Adventures, because Strange Adventures, Rorschach, Supergirl, Helen, those were all written straight. I wrote those, one after another, like a graphic novel. But Mr. Miracle was written, because I was on Batman at the time. I'd write a Mr. Miracle, then I write 4 Batmans, and then a Mr. Miracle. So it was written more, I think, for the gap reading.
And I think you sense that when you're reading it. You're definitely having that sense of stop, reflect, and move on. I mean, the reason why I've been episodic guy on television and all sorts of media ever since the cliffhanger of Deadly Assassin in Doctor Who. You watch that and then you have to wait a whole week. That gets you into kind of sort of sitting down and reading.
What I like about episodic is it's social. That to me, episodic means social. Like when I think of my best like watching experiences, I think of like when Mad Men was on, and you'd watch it on Sunday night, and the next day you'd read 30 recaps of all the theories, and then you call your friends, and like that is an unparalleled experience. And it's like one thing we can all just, when you're sharing it with a bunch of people, it's nicer than if you just read the whole thing and be like, let's go to a book club. It's much more fun to read just chapter by chapter and then call your friends and speculate what's going to happen and then yell and deconstruct. Socially, it's much better. Like I just did the latest True Detective. I had done that in a while, where I watched episode by episode and everybody was arguing about it. That's super fun.
What did you make of that show? Because it's been divisive.
I also, I don't want to comment on it because my friends,
as a writer as well, especially the finale.
I have friends who worked on it, so I have no comment. That's gonna be my comment on it. No comment. I think there was brilliance in it, and that's what I will say.
There you go, and yeah, fair enough. Okay. Well, speaking of episodic, then,
because if I just start praising it, it would just be like, oh, Tom's talking. You wouldn't get anything out of that. It could be lying through my teeth. But if I shit on it, then I'm just a shitty guy. So either way, you're not getting the truth. So what's the point in
that? Fair enough. When it comes to episodic, then, I mean, I'm going to bring up my favorite comic at the moment on the shelf, which is Wonder Woman.
I'm writing that today. As soon as we hang up,
I gotta write
page 14. So
this is just a book which I bound to my comic book shop to pick up. I'm enjoying this so much. And again, this is another Tom King experiment in absolutely expanding the world and blowing open what DC Comics landscape is all about, especially with the Trinity storyline. But when it comes to the main story, when it comes to the Wonder Woman title, this is reading very much like your sort of event books. It's reading like an Strange Adventures. It's reading like a Mr. Miracle. It's reading like a Vision. It's almost feeling like in a couple of issues' time, we're going to be wrapping this all up. It's going to be a 12 issue. It feels very strange considering that this is an ongoing book. Where's your mindset in terms of the book of Wonder Woman at the moment? Does it feel to you when you're reading it or writing it that it is kind of like a content story, or are you thinking much further ahead?
I always try to take Wonder Woman one issue at a time, so that I'm not. You learn from mistakes you made in the past. I'm not saying I didn't always do that on Batman, but I always want to make each issue. I don't want to withhold anything to be like, okay, we're going to eventually get to. In Batman, I was like, okay, Scott used the Joker too much, so I'm not using the Joker. I'm going to use Bane, but he's only going to be in it, in this. First we're going to do this and this, then we'll just tease him here. In Wonder Woman, I'm just like, if I see the kitchen sink, I'm throwing the kitchen sink in. So like I stole this from Tom Taylor, who's on Nightwing now. I give him all the credit in the world. I wrote Grayson, and we withheld so much from the audience. We couldn't put Barbara in the book. We couldn't put the kid. We couldn't put the brothers in the book. We couldn't show certain sides of him, and that was. It was by editorial diktat at that time. And then Tom comes on the book. And he's like, no, here's everything you want. Here's a superhero book that just is here to show you how awesome this character is. And I was like, Tom, that's brilliant. It's a brilliant way to do superhero comics. So I tried to adopt that in Wonder Woman, where I'm not holding anything back. So maybe that's why it doesn't read. Why it reads like a 12 issue series, where I'm always thinking like this could be the last issue. Every issue I want to, and the big theme of it is Wonder Woman is awesome. Yes, there's a plot. Yes, there's stuff going on. Yes, all of that. But the point of the book is to be like, this is a character who's been with us for 80 years, who many children throughout the world dress up as and pretend to be. And why is that? Why is she so cool? Why does she appeal to us? Let's answer. To me, that's a deep enough question to answer. Yes, there are deeper questions in the world about life and existentialism and all that Nietzsche and Bob Dylan shit that we were talking about before. But to me, the deep question of why Wonder Woman is awesome is a big enough question to focus a book on. So that's what I sort of concentrate on with each issue.
I mean, certainly the first two issues, I were blown away by the writing, if anything, because they're definitely, I mean, I could have absolutely thought that those books were written by a very strong feminist woman who definitely had a feeling deep down in her core that all men, American men in some degree, are absolute twats. Listen,
well, being an American man, and raising two American men as I am, I do not believe all American men are twats.
Well, I think a large proportion of them are, and as this is saying, as a bloke, all you have to do is just open up social media, especially in this particular election year, a lot of men are need a severe slapping down. But to have a character like Wonder Woman who's just willing to stand up and go, listen, yes, you are you are not behaving in the best of your agenda, and you really need to kind of have a word with yourself. But just generally as a species, we all need to be lifted up. And like you say, Wonder Woman is definitely a paragon of hope and of awesomeness, and someone to aspire to. Something that I'm curious about is that you start with an event which happens in a bar and is very much about a character we've yet to really kind of like investigate further on.
I really have to put her more in the book.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? I'm just wondering if is this something you are clearly you are conscious of, and where we are in that storyline and where that's going to come back to. Is that going to come back after the break?
Yes, very much so. Although, you know, Wonder Woman is coming up to, you know, there's a big event coming for DC, and Wonder Woman is part of the event, which will sort of, and we're doing part of that. You know, we obviously, I wanted to do the book in the very beginning to DC. I was like, I want to do crossovers. I wanted to reflect the rest of the universe. I was like, bring it all on. I want to do continuity comics. I'd been out of them for 5 years. Let's do them. So we're going to do the crossovers. We're going to have fun with those. We're going to do weird, crazy shit. So after the event, we'll probably get, there's some issues in between. As you saw at the end of issue 6, Wonder Woman gets sort of taken by the Sovereign. That's going to be the next 3 issues of her sort of in what that means and where she is. And then we'll break for the event. Then we're kind of going to get back into the Emily plot.
The mystery.
The mystery. And of course, the bigger mystery of sort of where Trinity comes from and all that stuff.
Right. Okay. Well, this is where I'm going to have to make my admission then. I'm loving this storyline. I'm loving what you're doing with Wonder Woman. I'm loving the Sovereign. I'm loving all of it.
But you fucking hate the backups.
No. This is what I am coming back to this book for.
God bless you. God bless you.
This is what I'm coming back to this book for. Because these 3 I am falling in love with so fucking hard. It's unreal. It's unreal how much I'm falling for.
Right. Isn't this the best? Oh my God. I have so much. This is my most fun thing I do, is writing these things. I love them so much. And it was
a question I was going to ask about.
Ortega draws them, and she draws them so perfectly. That was another stumbling upon a brilliant artist. Who knew? Yeah,
it was a question I was going to ask at the beginning, actually, and you've kind of answered it throughout. You've mentioned, because I didn't know if you had kids. Yes, you have kids, because you can write these 3 so well.
Not only do I have kids, I have 2 boys and a girl, so I have that dynamic, and I also have. They're not in this order, but I have 2. I have 2 that are close together in a trailer. I have, I have a 14, a 15-year-old, and then a 10-year-old. So I have I know this dynamic of 2 older kids and a younger.
I mean, Trinity. I'm trying to work out how you can sum her up, because she's just. I mean, what you've talked about in making sure that everyone is aware that it's all about the awesomeness of Diana, of making sure that everyone's reminded of just how good she is as a character, and how virtuous and how heroic she is. Trinity seems to me, and we're introduced in the main storyline, or we're reintroduced to a number of the aspirers to the throne, as it were. This is the true, natural progression of Wonder Woman, what Trinity is, and what we have seen, certainly with the special. I actually thought that I was going to be feeling ripped off, and I think I posted this on Threads, and you spotted it. That I picked up the special, and I thought, oh, it's just a reprint of the backup stories, and then you did that chapter at the back with the trials, and it's a case of what you have shown as an evolution of this young woman in the space of 6 issues. It's just almost mind-blowing how you've pulled that together. Is there anyone in particular that you've modeled Trinity on? Is there anyone? Is just how good is your daughter?
She's not that good.
She's not that good.
She's like Trinity. She has her opinions. I do not have a it's she's not what I would call a wallflower, but that's not to say she's like social. My daughter's very, very much like me. You know, she prefers to be in a corner reading than to be sort of playing in the yard. But she has her opinions and she expresses them righteously, and that Trinity gets a lot from that. I shouldn't admit where I got Trinity from, because I won't figure out what I'm doing. But I did base her personality on just as a starting point on a person, and then I took it away. But yeah, I love those things. They're mine. I have a deep and abiding love for newspaper comic strips. It's one of sort of my things I adore. And I love Peanuts. I love Calvin and Hobbes. I love Bloom County. I love Nancy. My kids and I read the Sunday, even though Sunday comics are so much less than they used to be. We still read them every Sunday together. I get the paper and we read them and we say which one's our favorite.
Nice.
And we go over the jokes, and they're really stupid, corny jokes. Like Hagar doesn't have much to say about the world anymore, but I still read. I read Hagar once a week. That's a ridiculous thing I do. So I get to channel all my love for comic strips and that rhythm and those reversals and those stupidities into that. And it's wonderful. I think 1 week I write 3 8-page stories in a row, and each one is more ridiculous than the next. For the next grouping, I ran into Belen at New York, and she was mad at me because I made her draw so many kangaroos, and she doesn't like to draw kangaroos. But Belen is Spanish from Spain. And she's like, "What is a kangaroo? I've never seen a kangaroo. Why am I drawing this for so long?" I was like, "What do you want me to draw?" And she's like, "I want to draw corgis and samurai," which was such a bizarre thing to ask for. But the next one has samurais in it, and the next one, and the one after that has corgis. Yeah, they get, and I'll just spoil it. But in a few more issues, there's 3 timelines I tell the stories in. There's 6-year-old Trinity, 13-year-old Trinity, and 19-year-old Trinity. And in the 19-year-old Trinity, she gets in a fight with Cersei, and Cersei turns Robin and Superman into corgis, and she has to deal with Super Corgi and Bat Corgi, and it's my favorite thing ever. You can't wait till you read it.
I'm buying the book already. You don't have to sell it to me, all right?
I'm telling you. Oh my god. When they go up and look up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's a corgi. I mean, when you write that, you're just like, okay, I did my job for today.
Outstanding. I mean, it's spooky that you were talking about Calvin and Hobbes, but it's when I showed my other half that the page with them on the moon, and she just turned around and went, "I want to see a Calvin and Hobbes version, or a kind of a take on these 3. I think that would, but who would be which?" And I just went, "Well."
It's part. I would love. God, I'd love to do. Let's do a newspaper comic with these 3. It's funny you show this page, because that's one of my favorite lines in it. And this was on purpose. It was obviously I wrote these balloons way too big, and then I put in there for Clayton. I was like, obviously these can't fit on the page, and just overlap them. But it erased one of my favorite lines there, which is when Robin, they're like, Superman wants to go get ice cream. Robin doesn't, and he goes, "Your only solution is the only thing in the world more vanilla than you, actual fucking vanilla." That I was proud of myself when I wrote that. I rarely like what I write. Usually I'm like, "Oh, shut up." The only thing more vanilla is actual fucking vanilla.
I can imagine writing this book. It's one of those where you actually sort of like reread the dialogue and just can't stop giggling to yourself for a good couple of hours.
Well, these are very group written. When I write these, in the morning I propose what I'm going to write to my children. They critique it. I write it during the day. I text them like, look at this panel, and they'll critique it. And then the dinner table we'll talk about. These are very group written by my family, who all along are giving me notes on how I can, and they hate everything I do. So yeah, that's why it's lovely to write, because my daughter and littlest very much love these ones, and when these books come, they immediately like, "Oh, Wonder Woman came," and they flip to the back and they read it. And that's what I heard.
Outstanding. I mean, is it a case that we may see another one of the King family doing some writing, and or is it just is there another budding writer in the family?
Well, my wife is, and she would admit this. She's she has a boring what she would call a boring lawyer job here in DC. So whenever we're at the table and the kids are like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" They're like, "Do you want to be a lawyer like your mother?" Like, "Oh no, we don't want to talk about satellites." Or do you want to talk about Batman and Superman? Like, "Oh, that's the career we want." So my kids are very interested in writing, but let them be whatever they want to be. Is my parents were like, "You're a doctor or a lawyer. That's what you are going to be when you grow up." Or especially and so I don't ever want to put my kids in that kind of box. So I was like, you find your own passion as long as you love it. I don't my son loves WWE, which is not my nerd. But I was like, if you want to go be a writer for WWE, fucking embrace that shit, man. Just make it.
I want someone to do a proper investigation on that Venn diagram between comic nerds and WWE. There seems to be a really strong kind of
there's a huge overlap there. There's a huge. I always, when he was a kid and he was really into it, I was like, "So you like guys in costumes fighting? How about these books?" And he's like, "No, I like them fighting in this way, not that way."
Fair enough. We are going to talk at the end about Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, if you don't mind. We'll leave to that one. But certainly a book that I do want to talk about is upcoming, which is something which I haven't got any artwork for because I haven't been able to find it yet. And I understand there's some people who've already got some preview copies, and I've been desperately
you don't have a copy of it?
No, I don't.
Oh,
no, I do not.
I'll get you a copy. I'll send you the first two
for this book.
I apologize. Send me, yes, of course. I'll send you a copy.
Oh man,
yes.
right. So this is
how did I? Sorry, that's my own stupidness.
You're teaming up again with Bilquis Everly and Helen of Wyndhorn.
Helen of Wyndhorn
is the book.
Very fancy title.
Tell me about this book. Where did this come from?
It came from a lot of places. But first of all, it came from Supergirl. I think that's sort of the most important thing. By the end of Supergirl didn't sell very well. Now it's my best-selling book. Almost by
really?
Oh yeah, because of the movie.
Hang on, it didn't. Okay, I'm stunned by that. I'm not somebody that follows sales of book. That didn't sell.
No, at the time it wasn't a big seller. It was one of those like I wish more people were reading it kind of books.
Unreal.
But I knew it was something special. It felt special in that way that Vision and Human Target and Mr. Miracle felt special. And I knew Bilquis was killing it, and I was like, I want to do more. Anything you want to do. And she said she wanted to do creator-owned. And she sort of sent me a vision board of the things she wanted to draw. And it was a lot of like 1930s movie stuff, which of course I love. Old movies are like my passion. And then she sent me some sort of a lot of high fantasy kind of, I don't know, like Al Williams, Alex Raymond kind of art. At the time, I was doing two things simultaneously. It was almost like a commercial where I was eating chocolate and peanut butter at the same time. I was reading Wuthering Heights and very much enjoying it and being like, wow, this is because I'd read it in high school and I just wanted to reread it. I read it in one night in high school and I was like, it's due tomorrow. You have to read it. I was like, crap. And so I wanted to revisit it because I feel like I didn't give, the Bronte the fair chance. And I was like, wow, this book is crazy. It's crazy how it's told and the idea behind it. And I was becoming a little bit obsessed. Same with like being obsessed with romance novels, with like these gothic novels of the 60s and 70s, where it kind of lived next to Pulp Fiction, where if you look it up, there's literally thousands of these novels that are, and the cover of them all is the same. It's always a woman running away from a very scary looking house. And it's sort of a combination of horror and romance. The way it really trickled into our culture, if you don't follow that kind of thing, is Beauty and the Beast is sort of is what a gothic novel is. It's a woman going to a strange house, there being a little bit of magic there, her being trapped there, her falling in love with the person who's in charge of the house. Which is also, a little bit what Wuthering Heights is. And so at the same time I was doing that, I was reading Conan like a crazy person. I had never gotten into Conan. I think I literally got like a comics magazine that was talking about Roy Thomas's. I was like, I want to read this. So I read a ton of Roy Thomas stuff, and then of course you get into the original stuff, and then you start reading about his life. So I was reading Conan, I was reading Wuthering Heights, and I was like, I'm going to merge these two things into each other to make our next Supergirl thing, and sort of that's where the story came from. And I created this story in my head that was a gothic mystery about, like I said, a woman going into a house. But this is not about romance. It's about a mystery of her. For people who don't know, the writer of Conan famously, he invented a new genre, is one of the most influential writers in the history of anything. I mean, if you're watching Game of Thrones, you're seeing his influence. And then when he was about 30 years old, his mother died. He walked from her deathbed to his car, pulled out a gun, and shot himself in the head. And the mystery of that suicide, there's a whole movie about it starring Vincent D'Onofrio. The idea of a mystery of a suicide, of sort of why a person killed himself, became sort of the center of my thing. And so I talked about a girl who's 16, whose father is a writer of Conan stories. I call him Othin. And he kills himself, and she wants to know why. And she gets taken to her grandfather's house. There's Helen. Her name's Helen. And she's taken her grandfather's house because she's only 16. She doesn't know her grandfather. He has this big mansion. And what she slowly discovers is that her grandfather is Conan, and that her father had not been writing fiction, but had been writing about his childhood and about his life. And it's about the grandfather and the granddaughter sort of trying to discover both who they are to each other and that generation in between them, why he died. And so that's what the book is about. Wow. It's a mystery about why a writer killed himself, told through the eyes of a Conan character and his granddaughter. And so that's Helen of Wynthorn. And it's because it's right from Wuthering Heights. I use the Windhorn, the W and the H. It's not subtle.
Wow. How contained is this? Are we talking 8, 12?
It's 6 issues.
6 issues.
Yes, and I consider it to be sort of the first chapter of a larger book. I mean, we'll see how it does, and we'll see what Bilquis can do. But it's a contained story, but it opens up a world that we can explore as we keep going. Is kind of the idea behind it. So yeah, these are the first 6 or the first chapter, or the first book of a larger project.
I love the fact that it's Bilquis who came to you with a vision board, and you just springboarded off that.
Yeah, what else are you gonna do? It was a beautiful vision board. It was everything I wanted to do. So, she. So I wrote this right after Supergirl. I mean, literally, she's been working on this for 2.5 years now, and you can tell once you see the art, it's mind blowing. She's perfect in Supergirl, and then she ups herself a level for this. There's just the world building. I mean, you can see from that cover, there's 1,000 lines there. It looks it's brilliant.
She doesn't mess around. That's for damn sure.
She doesn't.
Why Dark Horse?
I mean, the real answer is it's the exact same team that did Supergirl. So it's me, it's the writer, the penciler, the inker, the colorist, and the letterer. So it's all of us back together. And I did a book for Image with Elsa. Thank God I had Elsa on it. It was just a ton of work, just doing all the details. And I'm a guy who just wants to focus on writing because I write a lot. So I don't want to be bogged down in the bureaucracy of making a book. Sad to say, literally, do you want a 1/4 inch border here or a 1/8 border? All that stuff. I have no idea. I have no answers. Yeah. I just want to write the thing I want to write. So I wanted to go somewhere where I have an editor. And then once you do that, you want to go to some place that has a good editor, which Dark Horse has a brilliant editor in Daniel Chabon, who edits James's stuff and Brian's stuff. And I also wanted to go to some place where we could have control of the rights. And Dark Horse gave us that deal. So we can, I'm doing so much Hollywood crap now with, obviously. So the idea of turning this into something even, I don't want to say bigger than comics, is made to be comics, but that I can control, that Bilquis and I can control its Hollywood fate. Like Mitch and I can't control the fate of Sheriff, and I've always regretted that. So we can control this. So that was, and Dark Horse gave me that deal.
Is the choices that you've made when it comes to things like that, is it off the back of those first books where you had so much invested in them as your first books? I mean, Sheriff is one. I mean, is it something that you felt that you needed to kind of wrest control and have a better guiding hand to move forward with them? Because I mean,
oh yeah, I'm not saying something every single other writer in comics doesn't say, but yes, absolutely. When you, I mean, I have that Watchmen deal on Sheriff. As long as they do like these very, very, very easy things to do, they'll have it for the rest of the time. And it stinks because it's such an easy thing to make into a show. But I don't have control over it, and I don't have, that does. It doesn't bother me. I don't think DC ripped me off. I was very early in my career. I'm like, oh God, how dare you sign me up for my big break? Like what an idiot thing to say. So I'm not upset about it, but just I want to take it. I mean, I like what Elsa and I are doing in Hollywood with Love Everlasting more than I like what's happening with Sheriff, I guess is the best way to put it.
Cool. And let's speak about Hollywood. I think we talked about this just before we came on air. This could be an incredibly short part of the conversation. Yes, jump starting off this. I'm stunned you say that this didn't sell, or at least didn't have the numbers that you've. Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow.
It sells now. It's a wonderful little. It's the thing I always wanted to do. Which every time I go to a con, so many people just come up and they pick it up and they buy it. It's kind of this perpetual little machine. It's wonderful. Supergirl's a gift now.
It looks fucking stunning.
Yeah, it's also, it makes friends. It's a book I'm like, you're gonna buy this and you're gonna recommend it to somebody and they're gonna. It's like an exponential multiplier. It's the thing you always want as a writer. What a gift to have Supergirl. Thank goodness for Bilquis.
So when Mr. James Gunn got in contact with you, was Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow were the first things that you talked about, or were there other conversations? I mean, how did the conversation go?
We talked about this a lot. All questions.
I'd love to think that you didn't actually talk about comics or stuff. You just kind of like talked about other things and barreled into the conversation, because he seems to be the kind of guy that wants to have a really good conversation with people and really kind of learn what makes them tick, and hopefully you'll all gel together. And he seems that kind of guy. Someday
I'll be able to tell all the wonderful stories of all this stuff, but today is not that day. So yeah, if you ask me about that stuff, I'm just gonna like flash into cliches. They're gonna be as boring as if we talked about True Detective, where I'm just gonna be like, it's great, it's wonderful, everything's good, and I don't want to. Yeah, so. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's great. It's good. Everything is wonderful. It was great. It was good. Everything is wonderful. It's boring.
What kind of? Well, okay. I mean, we'll talk about. I mean, just stuff that you kind of bonded over, because I think that would really, if not inform what he's planning to do, but certainly about his sensibilities. I mean, what kind of things were you bonding over? I mean, you already said that you love old cinema. You love. Classic old retro arts. I mean, what kind of things were you bonding over? I mean, I'm not entirely sure I could even determine where his kind of points of reference are.
It's an excellent question.
As a person.
It's such an excellent question, and I wish we could talk about it, but I can't talk about any of that stuff.
Okay.
Even the bonding. It's stupid. I feel bad. I feel guilty. That's the way it is.
No, fair enough. And your thoughts on when you actually got that call? I mean, what was it a case of, okay, because I know that you're going to be, in the words of the releases, you are going to be serving as one of the architects of the new DC Universe media franchise of feature films. Was it a case of that's what he started with? Or was it a case of, no, I just want to talk to you about the book, man. I'm a fan. Can we talk about this for a bit?
Someday I will tell this story.
Oh, man.
Wonderful.
Okay. But it's
not, I have not, if I told the story now, it would be the most boring story. I'd be like, yeah, everything was great. It was wonderful. It was perfect. And you would just hear cliche after cliche. And I'd sound like one of those Hollywood people on the red carpet. You know, maybe it's boring. It's better for me to say I can't talk about than just for me to give you boring, generic answers. What's the
I'm trying to, okay. I'm just trying to think find out what things you bonded over. Beer. The recipe of a good old fashioned. I don't know.
I'll tell you something.
So fair enough. We've got some good friends rocking up into the comments. So just saying, what up, nerds? But hello there, Donnie. How the devil are
Donnie,
you?
what's going down?
Yeah,
seen you in a while. Show up.
Yes, very much so. Good guy. Good guy.
Very good guy. It's such a fucking talented writer. My God.
Very much so. Very much so. So I think at an hour and a half we'll let you go.
I'm sorry for those last answers. They're terrible. They're such good questions.
No, not.
Lord knows I want to tell you everything.
I knew it was coming. That's the reason why I'm not entirely disappointed. I knew it was coming. The audience knew it was coming. So it's not exactly a surprise. But I was just hoping that we'd find about not so much the work, but just you two as guys bonding together. And so I'm not wanting you to describe the moment you did the chest bump in the car park. But
I totally understand. I totally get you. I do not. I would be asked the same question and want to know the same answer if I was. So.
Fair enough. Well, Donnie's just replied in exactly the way that you feel then, and that's it. Meh. Fine. Okay.
My best Donnie memory is the two of us in a casino in Connecticut at 3 a.m. and him telling me what his Thor pitch was, and me just being blown out of the water. I just fucking thought it was so good. I was like, God damn, good job. Yeah. Donnie's a good guy. He's come back and write some fucking comics. You want what? Text you all the answers? 4, 5, 32. I don't know. It wasn't 40. 42 is the answer. No. The answer is to come back. Come back, Donnie. Come back to us. We miss you.
We do, very much so. Lots of love to you, man.
Lots of fun.
Well, I mean, what's next for you? Because I know that there's Animal Pound. Whereabouts are you with Animal Pound?
Animal Pound, the second issue is out. It's 2 of 5. So I've written 4 of the 5 with Peter Gross killing on art. And besides that, I've got Wonder Woman, Penguin, goes to issue 12.
Good God, Penguin. Didn't even talk about that, man.
And Helen is coming out. And Love Everlasting is stopping at 15 for a little while. And my schedule for the first time is going to narrow because of the Hollywood stuff. So it's going to start narrowing down.
Hollywood stuff.
Because of the Hollywood stuff. Down to. But I'm clinging to the Wonder Woman ongoing and to that backup, which I love doing both of those books. So that's my futures. Those 2 books. Excellent.
Well, I mean, I like I say, I look forward to all of the books. Certainly look forward to Helen of Wynthorn, which at some point I will get my hands on.
I'll send it to you. Jeez. Oh, so much guilt.
But Trinity is where I am at right now. That is my absolute love, and I'm for that. I just pour all my love to you, sir. Thank you very much indeed for coming on and talking to me. I really appreciate it. And all the success for everything on off screen, on off page. All the very best to you.
Thank you. Let me say, it's a very bizarre thing, but I left Twitter and I'm on Threads, and you're on Threads all the time. And I appreciate your presence there. You're a wonderful follow. And so thanks for keeping that you're every day I'm reading your shit. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I mean, it's basically just any kind of way of exercising the demons of the hellscape which we have left. Yes. And it's just bringing a little bit more positivity to this new, the new place that we all post to now. So yeah, and the fact that I can do GIFs is always a pleasure. So there we go. Tom, thank you so much indeed for coming on. Really much appreciated, mate.
Thank you so much.
All the best to you. Right. How cool was that? There you go. Tom King, I hope you enjoyed our incidental episode, and I do appreciate that maybe 1 or 2 questions were wanted to be asked about the future of the DC universe and what Tom will be providing to that as architect There you go. I hope that's going to be on the actual credits at some point. Architect Tom King. That would be rather cool. But no, certainly looking forward to all of his books going forward. I'm back again on Sunday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT with another Talking Con, a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego. This time we're going to be talking to somebody about an upcoming Kickstarter, which they're doing. So we're talking an independent creator, and we've also got all the updates and news that we've got coming out of WonderCon, barreling down the pipe, not that far away. That's going to be on Sunday. From me to you, thank you very much indeed for watching today, and we'll see you on Sunday. Take care.